Hello, and welcome to the show. This is just a short intro before we begin the episode, which I'm sure you will enjoy. We have a few things to share which are specials this season. If you're a writer and love the process and inspiration of writing on a classic typewriter, you can experience this magic opportunity by purchasing your very own typewriter. We do also have vintage or antique typewriters. Or if you already have a typewriter and it's broken, we are able to repair it so that your writing process can be that much more beautiful and enjoyable. Whether you're sitting at home, at a cafe, or traveling the world, you can now be motivated to write anywhere, anytime. Next, staying on the topic of writing. If you would like to purchase my poem book, they are now published and available. The Narcissist Recovery Guidebook, as well as the Grand Soul Awakening calendar collection of inner child poems on ascension and healing, as well as Divine Love Lessons, a poetic love story of returning back to your core self and the healing journey of understanding your higher calling, which has a touch of synchronicity, dream, numerology, ascension patterns, spiritual insights to soothe the consciousness and support the ego into pure, authentic soul growth. And it's a great gift for yourself or for a friend who appreciates the art of poetry and story. Next, you can order your personalized art painting, which is perfect for birthday gifts and holidays. And it's just a great opportunity to become creative and to inspire the younger generation or adults as well. And you can also decide which kind of art pieces, which can be seasonal or biblical or a Disney character or really anything that the inner child finds joy. Next, tutoring is also available. From grade school to middle school to high school to college courses, we have virtual math, reading, writing, essay help, resume help, college admissions, essay help, all kinds of tutoring. Last but not least, we have virtual ballet lessons and classes available for all ages and all levels. There are ballet bar workouts included, and all you need is just a little bit of space and a chair or something to hold on to. And this is going to be with accompanying classical orchestra music to bring a sense of levity and joy and just fun overall, while also strengthening the body and adding flexibility and grace to your daily posture. And I have a unique experience as I grew up performing at Lincoln Center with the York City Ballet, with Miami City Ballet, with Alvin, Ailey, American Dance Theater, and also at Madison Square Garden. So this unique mix of artistic expression has inspired me to create a whole list of ballet choreography, ballet classes, and to inspire people to come along on the journey to awaken their appreciation and their gratitude for body movement and body positivity. And I'm excited to share this with everybody, and everybody is open to join. So it's available to everybody. And we focus on creating elegant movement to the rhythm of the music, which makes you feel comfortable in your own space, at your own pace, and in your own skin. And this gives you an opportunity to enjoy the journey of imagination, beauty, integration, and encourages a sense of gratitude for yourself, for others, for music, and for nature. Classes are in session and all are well. And if you would like to have me on as a guest on your podcast and would like to be a guest on my podcast, please do let me know, as I am also collecting new interviews with upcoming. And for information on any of the things that I have mentioned, if you would like to participate in, or to purchase, or to just join the community, please send me an email at growthandgracemindset@gmail.com. that all of the logistics are out of the way, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast, where we talk about all things growth, wellness, and happiness. On today's episode, we have a special guest, James Peters, who is a transformational mindset coach. Ellie Weekly has recognized him as one of the top 10 inspirational experts of the year. He was included in Forbes Magazine, and he helps successful business owners rise up against their own limiting beliefs to inspire them to rewrite their story and ultimately achieve their next level of success. So, thank you so much for coming onto this podcast.
Awesome. No, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yes, we're excited. And it's very interesting how so many people are now looking up to transformational coaches. I remember when I started doing psychology in college, and this also inspired me to go on a personal journey. And without even realizing it, I became a transformational mindset coach as well. How did you get into this journey?
Yes, no, it's a good question. It's something I've been sort of fascinated with more over the last sort of 4 or 5 years or so, something like that. This path kind of was, you could somewhat say, forced upon me rather than a personal choice. I was bumbling along in life, generally everything going okay, and then three things came sort of out of the blue. The universe threw that curveball to me for a loss of a dad, loss of a son, and then accused of a crime I hadn't done. And but at that time, I had no tool set. So I hadn't done really any personal development work. I wasn't into anything like psychology or self development, or I might have heard of Tony Robbins, but that was about it. And so I was kind of then had to learn quickly and learn fast in that situation, because I think if you don't have a tool set, then you instantly go to the most disempowering thoughts you can ever have. So it was a long journey back from that particular place. But obviously, over the years, things have started to, to the sort of. I started my self discovery journey at that particular stage. Then went through a Jay Shetty program and became a life coach, and then got into more psychology and got right into like patterns of behavior and got into more and more deeper areas of the human psyche and stuff around, even basing on sort of energy work as well. So it was that's kind of obviously my journey to a certain extent of getting into this. It was a path which was more sort of thrown upon me more than anything else.
Wow, yeah, that's thank you for sharing. I'm sorry for your loss. And yeah, it's so difficult that it is true. We usually do have this kind of thrown upon us, and it's kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but it could be like a very deep soul lesson that we have to kind of go through and experience, and to kind of try to navigate this emotional journey as well. And it's so. And how do you personally within your space, within your clients, how do you measure transformation when it comes to your clients and even maybe yourself? Is it like an emotional change? Is it a physical change? Is it everything? Is it a little bit of everything?
I think it's a little bit of everything, but to a certain extent, the emotional change. I think, I do work. I usually, when people I work with have had a significant emotional event, which has, sort of taken them off balance to a certain extent. So it's about how we can look at those particular events and how can we can sort of transform them so they don't get hooked in emotionally through those. Because that's what generally I've found, and even kind of found with myself until I did the work, that certain events we have in our past, they kind of hook us in, and sometimes it can be unconscious. Sometimes we're not really aware of them as much. I think through my own journey and working with people, I've found that obviously a lot of our patterns and programs come through our informative years and stuff, and those still play today if we haven't really addressed them. And even though we may have dealing with more pressing issues, everything still stems back to those informative years and those kind of way, ultimately the way we react to certain things and at those particular times plays a huge part. So it's about sort of going backwards in a way, looking at that, but then a lot of it is around the significant emotional event, how people are maybe not getting as hooked as they maybe are, and so it's looking at a kind of holistic perspective of everyone. But I think a lot of it is, you can really measure successes, are they as hooked on a certain event as maybe they are or still are to be.
Yes, yes, it's very interesting, and I feel like as you do help people to rewrite their stories, we grab onto so many stories, even subconsciously, and I think we replay it so often, especially when maybe we do get lost or we do get stuck in a cycle and we can't fully get out of it. It's so easy to latch on to stories. Maybe these are even stories from childhood that we have picked up, or they could even be sometimes ancestral. I have a lot of clients where I work on like inner child healing, and sometimes there isn't even a clear awareness of that until that going back into kind of time through journaling and different kinds of methods that there's a realization that, oh wow, like this storyline that was replaying in my mind subconsciously has been in a way controlling and also minimizing my ability to reach that success or reach that next level of like spirituality or happiness. So it's like it's how do you work with people to help them to rewrite their storylines?
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject because I think you should say, right, as you say, a lot of it can come from these generational patterns of behavior which run through families and stuff like that. It really takes someone to kind of wake up to a certain extent. I think a lot of people are generally sleeping awake. They're run by patterns of behavior which are just playing in the background, and then they then define themselves as, though, this is just who I am, or this is just who I am, or this is just the way I act, or this is just who the way the way I've been brought up, all these type of things. And it's a narrative we then tell ourselves, but ultimately we can always change that. But it takes the work to change, to change that, that type of speech pattern and behavior pattern. And that's really, I think, where I like to come in and work with people in one-on-one, because that's where I've found I had the most growth, is when you can actually start speaking with people and actually they can look at and dig out some of the patterns of you're running, because sometimes it's very difficult to do that in front of the mirror or on your own. But I think, yeah, I think it is. It's about, first thing, it's about looking at certain beliefs and understanding, do these beliefs hold true to you, or are these actually your beliefs? A lot of them, actually people's beliefs actually aren't even theirs. It's something which they've sort of been ingrained in them from a certain period of time. And actually, again, a lot of it comes from our peer groups or our parents over time. So again, it's really being able to go backwards and kind of start to rewrite some of this story, start to understanding who they are as a person, start to actually kind of understanding like what do they want, where do they want. One of the first questions asked is like, actually, what do you want? Because actually most people don't know what they want. Actually, in most cases they know what they don't want, and they think that's what they want, and they go, and that's not what you don't want. What actually do you want? And it really stumps them, because again, it's how they program themselves through their own self talk. So it's really monitoring that, and it's really being able to come to wake them up to actually, not only can they change, but ultimately can they have to change the narrative, and ultimately reprogram themselves with a more of a positive self-talk. But firstly, you have to become aware of where did they actually come from first off, and then you can start unpicking them. Like that's what a lot of people say, like peeling back the layers of the onion. That's really what you want to do.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's so true. It takes that level of self awareness to slowly begin to become aware of the self. It does take accountability. So it's like if people are living in a victim mindset, which it is hard because if somebody actually does have trauma, they do have to understand that in one essence, in one space, they are a victim, but also not to stay there because I think it's hard to grow within a victim mindset if somebody is latching on them to that belief, and then it's also going to be hard because if they're going to be having a pity party every day, it's also hard to kind of leave that as well. So it's like every part of life has to be kind of dissected, and that's probably why transformational coaches are so good now because it's like an accountability partner in essence, accountability coach, and it's like helping people to to become aware of all of those minuscule details that do participate in this long term journey of evolving.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and I think it's very. It's one of those things where, especially if you've been for a certain event, traumatic experience, then you want to feel those feelings. It's
Yes.
it's definitely acknowledging those feelings, but not but not kind of accepting them. It's kind of acknowledging but not accepting, and it's being able to. I think sometimes we do grow up in a society which is predominantly more victim led. It's kind of more disempowering to a certain extent. It's kind of and so is there not getting if people are around people who are like that's why peer groups very important, but getting around people who are reaffirming your victim story, it just doesn't help at all. And secondly, it's being able to understand that you can change that. And but the challenge is that generally in through society we are more disempowered. It's about let's take a medication or do this or reaffirm that this is a challenge, and we can understand where you are and pour you and everything like that. And but it's about understanding that you can change this. But it's a lot around its accountability and the need and want to change as well. I think that can be some of the challenges. Is this work, even though you can get help from a lot of different people, is still on yourself in a lot of ways to want to change as well. And there's quite a bit of work in there to do that.
Yeah, it's true. Have you ever had experiences of like people latching onto you, for example, as like a savior complex? Because I've had a few clients who kind of were going around in circles, and I had to kind of tell them that they do have to heal this savior complex where they are also latching onto just anything external, and that's also part of a kind of disempowering essence.
Yeah, no, very much so. I think it is. It can be. I think when I obviously started working out or started working in this particular space, naturally you just you want to help everyone. Kind of just generally just help people because obviously you've come through a certain challenge yourself and you've seen the benefits of it, and so now you just want to help people. But then you can attract sort of certain people who just who kind of really want to reaffirm their story, to a certain extent. And even though they kind of think, well, you've got through this, but they kind of want someone who they can kind of reaffirm their story really. And they're not really wanting to change because they're running a pattern of behavior there. And it's a very obvious pattern where, they want to get around someone who can kind of, you know, understand where they are and kind of acknowledge that's their story, and that's a powerful thing. But actually then they don't really want to do the work to change that,
Right.
because and it's a pattern when you can see it and it's so obvious. But it's ultimately it's still down to that person actually wanting to change that situation.
And when it comes to shifting beliefs and patterns, how are the steps kind of followed through, and when do people recognize like, oh, okay, I have this pattern, and how do people go around changing it if they do have and maybe like it's low vibrational or it's a pattern that keeps them stuck.
Yeah, and it's like anything until you have until you are having that, and obviously like awareness is anything, but until you have that awareness of that particular pattern or where that particular pattern comes from, then it's very difficult to change that. So one of the first things I actually do with people is, even though they may be dealing with a pressing situation, I always go back, to childhood really, and take them through some childhood exercises, because then they can really understand and wake up to certain things, like this is how they've acted based on generally what they've been sort of accustomed to through being brought up. And when they actually can understand that and become aware of that, it makes a powerful situation to think, well, I act this way when this happens, and it's because of this. Because generally most people act exactly the same the way they do today as they did when they were a child, but it's just different. Maybe they don't sort of stomp their feet or throw themselves on the floor and have a tantrum, but what was it? It's maybe like the silent treatment or certain other. It's the same pattern but just different. We're kind of, I always say to people, like, we're growing up biologically, year on year, but emotionally, spiritually, that's always on us as a person to evolve. So that's why it's a common term. There's a lot of adult teenagers running around, because no one's really ever evolved from that time. But most people don't see it. They don't understand that. They think, they'll I'm older than now, I should know. And you do hear a lot of the time, that person should know better. They're old enough to know better. And actually it's not that at all, because if they haven't done the work or self development work, then naturally they run the same pattern. So it's about really understanding what they're running, where it's come from, where those beliefs have come from, and then and then we can start to change them. Because when you can start to do that, then you can start to have a different future.
Right, that's a great point, yes. And then there are so many things that do have to change, and maybe things like investing in ourselves and how to invest in ourselves when maybe nobody was ever taught how to properly give yourself self love without the narcissist component, but to prioritize yourself. Because I feel like a lot of people were brought up in essence to like people please, and this also has to in a way be rewired. And the nervous system does also have to be rewired. And I feel like in the beginning stages, so many people can feel those abandonment wounds or being rejected or neglected, especially if they're starting to stand up for themselves when before they were just always comfortable following a certain crowd, not being very upfront and standing up for what they believe in. So I feel like yeah, it's such a difficult journey and challenge to readjust the nervous system as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that, it's very powerful, because yeah, I think generally the way we are is all down to our down to our our nervous system. And even when I say to people when they're in sort of certain relationships, like I always say, like, you're having a relationship with that person's nervous system really, rather than anything else. And it kind of wakes people up, because sometimes they don't really understand it, and they think, well, yeah, one of the some of the core things you start off with people to do is stuff around breath work. Again, it's not we're not really taught this at school, but we understand, like, through breath work and getting from our sympathetic nervous system, and how we can switch through that, and stuff around meditation, stuff like that, calming those brain waves, calming our nervous system. Then you can start thinking creatively and start changing the way you act and behave. Because I find with most people, they always operating very high beta brainwaves, and so that's high stress. And so it's very logical that you can't think properly. You suffer lack of motivation. You suffer stress, because these are just, if you're operating in such a high beta brainwave, and you've got to get that down. So stuff around breathwork and meditation is actually one of the most powerful things. And I think you're right. I think, like, self love is that it's at the core of who we are. That's one of the things which happened. One of the key things which happened to me is I wrote down when I was going through difficult circumstances, like up to like 5 to 10 things of what I loved about myself, and then spoke that in the mirror and programmed myself, day to day, to because for that self love component, because sometimes we think it is more selfish to love ourselves, but actually it's the most important thing we can actually do. And a lot of people grow up through childhood with a lack of love. Even, that's what I generally find with people is, they weren't giving enough love as a child, and it wasn't, it's not anyone's parents' fault or anything like that. It's just how, just how we brought up, through our informative years. So yeah, it's a powerful thing, but I think those are some of the basis of starting. They sound basic, but actually the key things which make changes is, stuff around breath work and meditation to calm the nervous system, calm the brain waves. You can start making better decisions, and then start, gratitude and self-love are another, really, really powerful elements to include in your day. Because when you can start to do that, you end up start reprogramming your psyche.
Beautiful. I love that. I love the affirmations. It's really so true. Affirmations are speaking them. Like worded affirmations, it's such a powerful thing because I feel like when we speak the words, that's right away being able to translate our thoughts into kind of like physicality, the manifestation of what's inside of us. So I feel like that's really, really important. And I don't know if you also experience it, but when I personally went through like an awakening journey and going through healing, I started to become more and more of a minimalist. So personally, I never really gravitated towards materialism and it's kind of over the top luxury and spending a lot of money on things that I don't necessarily need. But even more so, I started to become aware of the things that I do need, and that led me to having a much more kind of easy lifestyle that didn't include a lot of materialistic items. And it felt so refreshing. And even though my friends and people around me thought differently and experienced life differently, it felt empowering to me that I was able to realize, oh, like I don't need this, and I can be comfortable and I can feel confident in my decision.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah, no, it's a very powerful thing to come from, because I think that's one of the key things is, I definitely had a materialistic type background and stuff. And before I went through my particular challenge, I thought everything was outward. I thought happiness was an outward thing. I thought when you had like that certain house, you had a certain status symbols, all this type of stuff that brought happiness within. I had no knowledge or understanding that it was the other way around. And so when you go through that journey and you understand that, and you actually realize that happiness is is very much an inside job, and you can have all the, and not saying that it's a bad thing. I think, having, stuff which you like is great. And if you have a large house or all this type of stuff, it's great to have, but it's not going to make you happy. You can, I did something earlier today where, on a post where, one of the unhappiest I've been is when I had a lot of those things. I was like holidaying in Dubai in great 5-star resorts, all this type of stuff, and actually felt really empty and lonely and unhappy inside. And then other times when I've been on a tent in halfway up Kilimanjaro with absolutely nothing, hadn't showered for for days, felt broken, and actually felt, probably one of the happiest I've felt. So, and it's all inside, it is all perspective. It's all an inside job. And I do live a little more minimalist now, because I've realized through some of those challenges I've done that when it really broke down to at the end of those challenges, all you wanted to do is get back to, you know, either, didn't anywhere which had a bed, which had a shower, and had some food. And it really broke down to those three things. Really, there was never, you won't really think of anything else. You just wanted those particular three things. And then I just, you have those cognitions and realizations that actually not, you don't really, you don't need anything more than that, and everything else is just an added extra. And sometimes that clutters the mind as well. And that's why you see a lot of CEOs, especially like Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg for quite a while, you know, pretty much the same type of clothes and everything. Everything was very, they uncluttered their mind. They didn't have so much choice which they had to make. There's just everything was very, straightforward. And there's a lot that can be said for that.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think it's very interesting. I feel like whoever works with transformational mindset coaches should totally experience like a week or something, a retreat into a minimalistic initiation. I feel like a lot of things will be revealed to them, and I feel like that's a great kind of way to start that inward journey, because we do sometimes become so accustomed to the physical and materialistic lifestyle. And if we don't have gratitude and full awareness of that experience, it also is going to bring us to a deeper depression, because we're not seeing what's in front of us and we're not being appreciative of it. So that's why it's like that spirituality, taking that mirror towards your spiritual essence, it's going to bring more clarity and more appreciation of the physicality once we do experience that like spiritual awakening.
Yeah, and I think it's right. I think, I mean, I particularly, before I went through my stuff, I wasn't particularly spiritual or religious. Really, I didn't really have. I wasn't. I was kind of didn't. I was kind of nonplussed about it. Um, but when I did start that journey, and one of the first people I want to count as I saw was actually very much into Buddhism and into Buddhist type practices and stuff like that. So then I started getting into that, and I really really understood that having a faith or belief or a spiritual awareness to a certain extent, or even kind of, is is key really, because when you can tap into a higher intelligence and understand that the universe is always working in your favor, and it's giving you the tests which you need to have at this moment in time, and we're on this path and journey, and it's about embracing the flow of the river and not fighting against it. But if you don't really have the awareness of that or the understanding, it can be very difficult, because you'll just always be, why me? Why is this happening to me? And
Right.
then and it's very difficult to really get across to someone that their thoughts are creating their reality. And it's a very hard concept to understand if you don't really have a spiritual, religious type of awareness or knowledge or want to learn. Because when you really brace it down, that our thoughts create our reality, and the primary sort of law of the universe is law of attraction. Everything vibrates. We're all, everything's vibrating around us. We as people, humans, this table, whatever, everything's vibrating at a certain frequency, and we're attracting back that frequency we're giving out. So if you are in these lower level emotions, you're just going to attract that more to you, and it's very hard to people to really get that around their logical brain, because it doesn't, it's not something we're brought up on to understand. It doesn't sometimes make sense. And so if you don't have generally a bigger awareness of a higher intelligence, it can be hard.
Yes, yes, totally, totally. And when it comes to these sessions and the work that you do, what is the goal for people? Is it enlightenment? Is it just a deeper self-reflection? Is it just, is it the success? What kind of levels of success do people achieve with your program and with your work?
Yeah, yeah, it's always a difficult one to determine, like mindset, because it's not like a tangible result to a certain extent. Um, what it is, it's taking them, from where they are to a whole new concept of what their future self is going to be like. So it's about starting at, where they are today, going backwards, understanding the patterns they're running, understanding where they come from, and looking at those beliefs. Then we're starting to recreate an identity of who they are, and then tapping into their future self of what their future self wants to be like. So it's about then creating not only an identity statement, but also creating a vision for their future of what that looks like, and then tapping into that. So they're not so swayed to not only to the past, but also swayed of just living in this moment, in physical moment in time. They're tapping into a bigger future of what that is, and they're not so hooked emotionally on a particular event which has happened, because that's usually most instances, most people come to me because of an event which has happened in their particular life, which has completely thrown them off center. It's completely reached it's kind of like a paradigm shift to a certain extent.
Yes.
That's what needs to happen. You need to have a shift in mindset, shift in paradigm, and you sometimes can we can kind of really take that event and really what I try to do, and it's a difficult challenge, is to take that event which they're looking at and completely flip it on its head. So it could be the most traumatic experience they've had, but how can we change it and be very grateful for that event? How can we completely change the narrative of that event and look at it from being grateful for it happening, rather than being so disempowered by why it happened? And it can be a very challenging, especially if it's if it's a loss of a loved one, for example. It can be challenging to go through that event, but that's kind of what it is. It's about taking an event, transforming it, re-looking at their past, getting knowledge and insights around the past about why is that defined them as a person today. There's patterns and programs, behaviors, and then it's about them recreating an identity and then looking at an empowering future.
It's beautiful. And what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh yeah, it's powerful question. So I think if I looked back now, I would always say to him, um, it would probably be the essence of self-love. Have that at the core,
Yes.
because that was something which I definitely lacked. It was only when I started my journey I realized that. But having that love for yourself is probably one of the most powerful things you can do.
Wow. Yeah, it is so hard to love ourselves, especially when we're going through stuff. Feels like we start to hate ourselves so much, and it's very challenging to actually love yourself through all of the things, because I feel like every kind of rejection or every kind of loss, every kind of betrayal, we feel like a failure, and we put that pressure on ourselves of like, oh, we failed, something about us, we failed, and then this is this is already rewiring our brain and our mindset to that victim narrative, and that's where that journey has to begin in the opposite way. And like you said, yes, becoming aware of the pain and the struggle, and not latching on to that victim mindset. So just really, that's like the most challenging thing, like not to latch on and to just keep going.
Yeah, no, it's very important, because I think at our essence, we are still that, even though we've grown up and we're a different person, and obviously we're evolving all the time, our body's changing, but at our core, we're still that 4 year old, 5 year old, 6 year old, whatever. That is still who we are and are at our core. And when you offer yourself self love, you're offering love to that particular person. So, and that's where it really is powerful, and sometimes that's why, you know, you, if you have a picture of yourself at that particular age, then it's great to then offer love to that person, or say when you are talking negatively to yourself, if you have a picture, then sometimes it's easy to reframe it to say, well, why are you being so bad to that person? And it kind of throws you, because that's really what you need. You need to have a shift. You need to have something which shakes you out of your current paradigm, and sometimes that can be really powerful to do that. Sometimes I say to that person, if they have a picture of themselves at a certain age, I say, well, why do you speak negatively to that person? And then they kind of like take a step back and then realize that yeah, why do I do that? Um,
Yeah, that's
but you need someone to help you through that, really, and stuff like that. And there's so many different things out there. Some people like obviously go into things like ayahuasca experiences and all these type of things, which can be very, very powerful. But you have to really change yourself. You have to raise your own level of awareness or consciousness, really, because otherwise, you just like anything, you fall back. To that particular person, if you've not actually changed your core of who you are.
And what are your top three things that you either offer your clients or yourself that you invest in terms of like self love and giving yourself self love?
Yeah, it's just, I think one of the key things I like to do. Obviously, gratitude is really important. I mean, you've got to build a muscle of gratitude. And sometimes it's very difficult at the beginning to do that if you're not used to it. But building that muscle is very important. Everything we can always be grateful for anything we have. I think the self love is really important. I always say to people, you can literally change yourself if you just say to yourself each morning and each evening, or even as often as you can, just say to yourself, "Thank you, I love you, thank you, I love you." Program yourself really powerfully, especially at night time and in the morning. That's the first thing you kind of default to, and then I always get people to write an inventory of why they are awesome, because a lot of people don't have a lot of self empowerment around them. So that's one of the things I do is I work with people to say, well, let's build out a list. Let's maybe start with 5 things and then continue to increase it week on week. But if they have like a real big list of like 20 odd things why they are awesome for whatever reason, then they have things they can turn to very quickly. So when they are having a bad day or negative self talk comes up or things are happening, they've got their list, they've written it down, they can go straight to it and go, oh no, this, because that's really what you need. Because sometimes if you don't have that list, you can really get into that downward negative spiral. So it's about building up these tangible things around you, be it like affirmations and mantras or these type of things. Really powerful to have there, but yeah, I am statements are great, or your name, X, Y, and Z, having certain things which you can just quickly turn your head to when things go wrong, because it's human nature. We are generally we are programmed for survival, for fear. It goes back to, we have a 2 million old brain. It's wired for survival and fear because that's what our ancestors used to live in, that type of environment. So we do default there as negative. And then when you add stuff around mainstream media and all the news and all this type of stuff, and generally through society or events happening, we are generally more negative than positive. But how can you start to change that? Because your life really changes when you default positive. You know,
Yes, I love
you
that.
celebrate. You can celebrate the negative. You can celebrate the things going wrong, and that's very hard for majority of society to be able to do.
Yeah, it's so true. And that routine, I think routine is also very important to add a consistent routine. And I think healthy routines really do play a role in shifting long term mindset. I remember like, well, because I grew up as a dancer and we had ballet routines every single day, and it could be the same routine for like 10 years, just a little bit changing the choreography. Like we had bar and center, and we just have to do the same thing, and we tried to perfect it, and this gave us that strength to be able to perform any kind of choreography on stage. So I think going back to a healthy, stable routine that is going to support the psyche and the psychological mind, I think is also pretty crucial.
Yeah, everything is down to our habits and creating new habits, and being able to put a routine in place and having some sort of structure there is very important to have that, because otherwise, again, we kind of we're kind of at a little bit of a whim, really, of how things of how our day can go. And if you so I think that's why the morning is so important. If you can have a certain, like, you get up at a certain particular time, and the first thing you look at is a is some powerful information. It could be a page of a book, or it could be a poem, it could be a meditation. Really programming yourself, because obviously when you do leave your front door, if that or head out into the world, or pick up your phone or whatever, instantly you're very reacting to what's coming in. And so that's where one of the key things is to start your day off in the right manner of what that looks like. And even if it's, you can have these most elaborate morning routines, which some people do, and I've had in the past, or you can just have it very basic. You can have it, half an hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes of just putting yourself in the right frame. Because, I think that's really important, because I think if most people are going into their day with a little bit of no form of structure, that compounds the problem very, very quickly.
Yes, that's very true. And how do you define success?
How do I personally define success?
Yes.
So I think for me personally, it's always like defining, like, am I doing am I doing my best? Am I am I working to the highest self, or I am on the journey to be my highest self? And that's really where I would, you know, define, or terminate success. It's not anything external. It's not really with how, you know, if I've got certain things coming forward, or so many, like people say, how many email subscribers, how many likes they've got, all this type of stuff. I don't look at anything outside, because you can never control. If that is, you can never control it. But if I can put like hand on my heart each evening to say I did my best today, I operate at my highest self, I was then that for me is success, for me personally. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I personally define my success.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yes. And where can people connect with you and see your work?
Yeah, so probably the best places are either Instagram is James Peters Lifestyle. I'm active on there. Active on most social platforms, like X in particular. There's another platform, Twitter. James C Peters. Those are probably some of the key things. Um, Website jamespeterslifestyle.com. So yeah, those are probably some of the key areas, or key platforms to catch me on.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, James. I had such a wonderful and eye-opening conversation. I feel like so many of our listeners are going to appreciate this, because I feel like we're all going through a mindset shift all the time, whether we're going through trauma or we're healing different levels of trauma. We're all just trying to become a little more enlightened. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you and your work.
No problem at all. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.